Well, here we are. This was the picture I showed you of Alain Forget last time. Remember that the big white blobs I've just put there to show that he can give light, and he can do it wherever he is. So let's then have a look at what I want to talk about, and that is the light phenomena themselves. But I think more important than that, is this something which is really new? Is this something which is just our own imagination? Or are we really looking at the ability of one mind to affect another? So let's have a look at it. So light phenomena have a long history of association with meditation, spiritual experience and death. And I've been through death a little with you and spiritual experience a little with you. And we mentioned meditation last time. Although if you ask Alain what he's doing, he doesn't say he's meditating. So here is a meditation one study. It's a phenomenology of meditation-induced light experiences, traditional Buddhist and neurobiological perspectives. Now you can probably hear Casper in the background. He's come along, but of course you can't see him. And what they said is that the light, the people in their meditation, were strings of light, globules of light, coloured jewels, lights in rays spreading out, radiant light. So we need to try and understand that in some way. And this is from that paper. I was just bursting with light. I just closed my eyes and it was just brilliant light. I just felt like I was radiating, like there were rays of light coming out of me. It felt like it was just emanating from my body and my system. But this wasn't my entire retreat by any means. It was just near the end. So you had to work up to get these feelings of light, of the light experience. So this is Alain Forget, and I've shown you his book, How to Get Out of This World Alive. And he tells us that when he gives light to people, he just stands back into the void, and then the light phenomena appear automatically. Well, this is what I really want to show you. This is all going to be a little bit technical, but hold in there if you can, because we in fact see that we are interconnected in most interesting ways. Now, the two subjects are Alain with his back to us. You can see the cables from the cap on his head. It's red and yellow, and all the little dots are electrodes. And you can see one of his students, and he's in fact taking a photograph, and he has a cap on exactly like Alain, and they are going to face each other during the session. And they, behind each of them will stand somebody who's giving them the clue as to whether they are to attend or not attend, whether they are to whether Alain's to give light and whether they're to receive it or not, but the other person doesn't know. So then let's look at some of the results. These I showed you last time. It's very important. This is a power spectral density graph. As I say, hang in here for the data. First little peak on the left is the power of the alpha rhythm. And then during the giving of the light, you can see this huge change in these faster frequencies, starting in the beta band and going right on up into the into the high gamma band, and the end of the graph is 100 hertz. So it's really fast activity. It's not all over the head, because if you choose one of the electrodes at the front, then it has a very low amount of gamma activity, which doesn't follow this pattern. These are pictures, and it's Alain's. There are three pictures. The top one is the delta, then below it the theta, and on the right the alpha band. This is power spectral density. Hot colors are more activity, cool colors are less activity. Blue is least of all, and red is most of all. You can see that the difference between Alain's pictures and the students' pictures is very little in both the delta and the theta bands. But as soon as you come to the alpha band, they're beginning to look more alike. But as you come up into the beta band, these faster frequencies, you can see that Alain has developed a total different pattern from the other subjects, and it's very, very, very powerful as you go up into the 35 to 45 hertz region, or gamma 1, and of course there's a lot of it there in gamma 2. So there's no doubt his brain is functioning quite differently in this state from how it does ordinarily. So the conclusion of the power spectral density when energy is given is that the beta activity is more prominent in the left posterior temporal leads. Very high amplitude of gamma in this area. Gamma spreads forwards at higher frequencies, and very unusual amplitude and spread of gamma activity. So how can this be? And is there a relationship between Alain and the student? So should we look for a connectivity and the driving of the electrical activity of one brain by another? Does Alain actually drive the student's brain? We can ask that question. We can ask that question because of something called phase slope index. This is a way of looking at whether two signals, these are the EEG signals, are similar or not, and which one is causal to the other. Now, if you look at this in the middle of the slide, you see a small a, and predict signal X. So you try to do the math to find out what the next value of the signal X, this is the EEG channel you're looking at. But in order to do this, you use the information of past values of X. Say you look at the past of the signal and try and predict what the next one is. Now, there's nothing very interesting or unusual about this, and you either are successful or you're not. But now look at B. And this is where things change. You can predict the signal of X by the past information of the past values of X, just what we've done above, and of the past values of another channel, Y. So B has X and Y. And if the prediction in B is better than the prediction in A, then Y is a cause of X. So that channel Y is causing channel X. So now we can ask the questions we want to. Does the teacher cause effects in the student's brain, and does the student cause effect in Alain's brain? Let's have a look at that. We divided this up into the usual EEG bands and calculated the phase slope index, or PSI, between all pairs of electrodes within the brain and between the brains. But we're interested for the moment in those between the brains. There's Casper saying something. The bands we used were delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma 1 and gamma 2. And so let's have a look at that. Now, in the 1 Hertz band, the student is driving the teacher. That's interesting. So there's clear evidence that in the 1 Hertz band, the student drives the teacher. 10 Hertz band, the teacher drives the student. 29 Hertz band, the student drives the teacher. 44 and 66 Hertz band, these very fast frequencies, the teacher drives the student in both those bands, and these are all statistically significant. So here we're beginning to get an answer to our question. Does the teacher and student interact? And the answer to that is yes. So let's look at this picture of the brain, and you can see that there are different areas marked out. Just at the top of the writing, you see the postcentral gyrus. It's got figure 2, which is Brodmann's area 2, and that's just behind the motor cortex, and I'll say no more about it. Then behind that is the somatosensory association cortex, very important area in the parietal lobe, and I put that little red spot to show that this is the one which we're going to talk about next. And so this brain cortical region, which is called BA7, is related to the auditory, visual, olfactory and somatosensory sensations, which are located lateral to the lateral fissure and posterior to the central sulcus. That is more towards the back of the brain. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful, but it's saying that that area of the cortex is related to proprioception and feelings. Now, you remember that one of the things that the student says is Alan causes feelings in him. Does he do it by stimulating this area of the brain directly? And if he does, what does directly mean? So here's the next one. And now we're looking at the angular gyrus. And you can see the little red dot has moved down to area 39. And the angular gyrus is involved with transferring visual information to one of the areas related to speech. And it makes meaning out of visually perceived words. It's also invoked in a number of processes related to language, number processing, spatial cognition, and interestingly, memory retrieval and theory of mind. I won't go into this, but I'll just say that it does have a relationship to words, it does have a relationship to memory retrieval. So interesting, but not nearly so clear in terms of the light as was the first one. And now we come to area 37, which is the fusiform gyrus. This is a very interesting area. It's an area which, if you have a damaged fusiform gyrus, they would be unable to have trouble, they would have trouble identifying people they know. You may remember there's that wonderful book about the man who thought his wife was a hat, or something like that. But in other words, they personal identity is confused. As well as face blindness, they would also have trouble processing colours. They might also have trouble reading. Now that's important because colours, changes like that and changes in faces are what you see during the giving of the light. And then finally you come to this last one, the visual cortex right at the back, and this is just simply the primary visual areas which are the early stages of vision when you look at the structure of the visual scene. So that's what the way the teacher's brain interacts with the students using the PSI data. Now, Alain is also driven by the student. Now that's interesting. So how is he driven, and is it different? Well, if you look at this picture, you can see that the somatosensory and the postcentral gyrus and the angular gyrus are all there no fusiform gyrus, which is interesting. So faces aren't something which the student drives Alain with. And you've got the primary visual cortex. But do look in the front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. That is the way the students differ. So the main changes are no fusiform gyrus and the new area BA10. Now, what does BA10 do? It's really enormously interesting and very high level. It's to do with goals, objects, actions, memories, and it promotes learning about the sort of goals we want to move towards, and cost benefits of actions and improving future choices. It's really very, very high level stuff. But that is the area that the student changes in Alain. So you can argue that the student is giving him back information which he then can change or alter or improve when he gives the light. So the teacher says that when giving the light, he's multidimensional. What does that mean? Multidimensional means that he steps back into the void. He's not there. There's nothing there. This is not unusual in people who are in fact non-dual. It's one of the characteristics of being non-dual. You lose your simple sense of self and become cosmic, and he can do this. In this linkage, so that raises the question, when he's in the state, is this linkage simply restricted to that very special state, or is it a general property of mind communication? So are we looking at here at brain to brain or mind to mind? Is there something to do with telepathy or not? So we have to keep our mind open until we can get more evidence from further studies. Now, I would like you all to think about the two theories of consciousness. Remember, we talked about the filter theory of consciousness, where the brain acts as a filter to a cosmic experiences which are out there, and the physical theory of the brain, and that is that, of course, all these experiences are just simple brain experiences. Well, I'd like you to read this book because I was asked by one of you if I could suggest a book which would talk about not just the physical theories of the brain, because remember, we do not know what consciousness is. And this is a book called The Irreducible Mind, and it's towards a psychology for the 21st century, and it looks at these questions of telepathy and gives you the actual data. And so I'd like you to read it. It's actually quite a lot of pages. It's 800, but you can borrow it from the library and go through it. And you'll find that there's a lot of evidence pointing towards the filter of the theory of the brain as being true. But of course, on the other hand, there's a lot of evidence pointing towards the physical theory. Both theories don't, at the moment, explain consciousness, and this is what we want them to do. So that was a little bit complex. I hope not too complex. But what comes out of it? Alain, when he steps back into the void and his subject is there, he drives the subject's brain and the subject drives his brain. They're not absolutely identical in the way they drive each other, and the student, in fact, has a much higher level of driving Alain's brain than Alain does with the student. Now, it's not unusual for new students to see that Alain looks like an old Chinaman. This is something which comes up. And with Alain changing or stimulating the fusiform area of the brain, facial recognition, this would be one of the things that you might expect. Now, the student, don't do this to Alain. This is only Alain stimulating the fusiform area in the students. So then, those are all the slides I'm going to show you today, and we'll go on with the final summing up of today's talk. Thank you.
Well, they're interesting, but your tax